Hi, Carlos Pitara here. This is part two of our video series on your fiancé visa interview. Some of the questions that you need to get prepared for, as well as a checklist that we provide at the end of this video so that you can download it and get even more questions. Today we're going to discuss 5 different areas of concern that you should be aware of as you go into your interview. Now, something that I did not mention in the first video is that your fiancé interviews will usually only last 5 to 15 minutes at the consulate. The person under scrutiny, the person being asked, is the immigrant fiancé. Now, the U.S. citizen fiancé can attend, but it's not their job to answer questions. Their job is just to sit there and lend moral support, keep quiet. The fiancé visa is the one that's under the gun. The from the immigrant country, they're the ones that are going to have to answer the questions. So with that, let's get started. Because as you know, at Pitara Immigration Law, we don't believe that valleys and mountains and bridges and borders and waters should stop a couple that truly wants to be together here in the United States from being together. So, here we go. First set of questions that I'd like to discuss today concerns after marriage. As you know, when you get a fiancé visa, you'll be allowed to come into the United States for a period of 90 days. During the 90 days, you're supposed to get married. So one of the viable areas of questioning by the immigration officer is going to be what you plan to do after marriage. Certainly, if you have plans to live here, then you have plans to do certain things. So, does the fiancé, for instance, plan to go to school here in the United States? Does the fiancé plan to improve their English-speaking ability if it's not quite that strong when they arrive? Do they plan to go to school here and improve that? Does the fiancé from a foreign country plan to work in the United States? Are they going to attend, say, adult day schools and work at night? What's their plan? General plan. Now, certainly, they're not going to have a lot of specific details, but there could be some general details that are right for questioning. Now, in some cases, there may be specific details, such as the American fiancé has an uncle that owns a company, and he's going to employ the fiancé coming into the United States from another country so that he or she could start working right away. What are the long-term career plans? Not just of the immigrant fiancé, but also the U.S. fiancé. Have you talked about that? What are the long-term plans? What are the dreams 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? Think about that, because you want to be ready for that type of questioning. The more you're ready for that kind of questioning, you're going to be able to fill in the gap on other types of questions. The second area, and this is a big area, culture. It's an area that is often what we call a red flag area. It's where the official's going to break it down to see what similarities you have culture-wise, what differences, and the further apart you are, then the more they're going to be questioning, is this a viable marriage? And as you'll recall, in the first video of this 2-video set, I mentioned that the real purpose of the fiancé interview is to make sure that this is a real, genuine, bona fide, legitimate marriage. That is not just a fly-by-night one that's being done for money, that the immigrant spouse is paying the U.S. spouse some money to marry him, bring him to the United States. That's really what they're on the lookout for. So anyway, culture. Culture is, think about the nationality. Sometimes individuals from the U.S. Have their ethnic roots in another country. And so there would be some ties if they marry someone from that country. Maybe, perhaps that's how they met. The United States citizen fiancé went to their homeland to visit a cousin, to visit an uncle and aunt, to visit a grandparent, and while there they met the love of their life. That's how it happens sometimes. So that's one area of concern. Language. How does a couple communicate? It's not just a matter, do you communicate by email or Skype or Google Hangouts? How do you communicate language-wise? Does the parties speak each other's language? Or does the immigrant spouse speak English? Or does the United States soon-to-be spouse speak the immigrant fiance's language? What is it? Language. How about religious beliefs? Do they share religious beliefs, or do they have different religious beliefs? One's a Christian, one's a Muslim. What's your plans on that? Have you even discussed that? How are you going to deal with that when the fiancé is living in the United States and then you get married? How are you going to deal with those types of cultural differences, those types of language differences, perhaps even dietary differences? So culture is a big area. It's a big area, because if the more there are differences, the more negative it's likely that the officer is going to take a look at the relationship. A third one is marital history. And again, remember that it's the immigrant fiancé that's being questioned. But that doesn't mean that questions about the United States fiancé is off limits. In fact, they're not off limits. What do you know about the U.S. fiancé's previous relationships, and especially if there's previous marriages, especially if there's children from the previous relationships or previous marriages? If the immigrant fiancé has visited the U.S. fiancé in the United States, has the immigrant fiancé been introduced to the United States citizen's children? And if not, why not? And if so, how did that go? Are they planning to live in the same household? For instance, the United States citizen spouse, which is more likely if it's a female, but not, it could also be a male, but in most, given domestic law in the U.S., it's a female that generally ends up with custody. If the foreign fiancé is a male and they're going to live here in the United States, what's going to be the relationship with the foreign fiancé and the United States fiancé children? That's ripe for questioning. On the other hand, conversely, the same question can be asked the other way. Has the fiancé from a foreign country, have they told the American fiancé about their previous relationships and their previous marriages, and perhaps their children from those other relationships? Has the American fiancé, if the American fiancé has flown to the country of the immigrant fiancé, have they met the children of the immigrant fiancé that live in the other country? Is the American fiancé also going to try to immigrate and bring in the children of the immigrant fiancé? Those are right questioning. Those are right questions, and you should be prepared to answer them as thoroughly, completely, and honestly as possible. A fourth area of concern, similar to marital history, is family and friends. Because what happens here is it's a matter of confidentiality, of privacy. How much does the fiancé from another country know about the U.S. fiancé? And conversely, how much does the U.S. citizen fiancé know about the immigrant fiancé's family and friends? For instance, if the American fiancé went to the country of the immigrant fiancé and they spent some time together, during that time together, did the American fiancé get to meet the immigrant fiancé's parents? If not, why not? And if so, how did that go? Did they get along well? Is the immigrant fiancé's parents accepting of this relationship? What about brothers and sisters of the immigrant fiancé? Did the American fiancé meet the brothers and sisters? Did they hang out together? Did they go to the movies together? Did they go to restaurants together? How did it work out? Did people get along? Are they accepting of the relationship? Same thing with cousins, uncles, aunts, grandparents, best friends from work, best friends from childhood. And it also goes the other way. If the immigrant fiance came to the United States, was that person introduced to the American fiance's best friends, co-workers, parents, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, neighbors? How much of the relationship between the two has evolved to the point that they know a good deal about each other, that they have actually spoken as a couple would prior to getting married and introducing the other person to those who are closest to them? That's very common in a normal relationship. So it's very ripe for an interview for a fiancé visa. Travel history, which has sort of been implied in a lot of the previous points that I've mentioned. Has the immigrant fiance come to the U.S., not just this time, to visit the American fiance, but other times? Have they ever come here to visit relatives that live here? Or have they just been here on a tourist visa to do sightseeing? Have they ever taken some type of, say, company trip to the U.S.? And did they comply with the terms of those trips? Conversely, has the United States fiancé been to the other country and how many times? Now, one of the requirements, of course, is that the couple have met within the last 2 years, that they spent some physical time together, that they've met in person. Now, certainly, there's got to be a trip one way or the other way, either to the United States by the immigrant fiancé or to the immigrant fiancé's country by the U.S. fiancé. And so the nature of those travels are definitely going to be probed. But it's not just those. It's other trips that especially the immigrant fiancé has made to the U.S., because since that individual is seeking to come into the U.S. legally, the American government is going to be looking very carefully to make sure that they haven't violated the terms of previous visas or previous visits. So the point is this. When you go to a fiancé visa, you need to be prepared for a wide range of questions. As I noted in the first video of this 2-video set, I wish I could give you all the questions to be prepared for. I can't. And even the guide that's provided at the end of this video, as long as it is, about 180 questions, it is only a warm-up. And you don't want to rehearse the answers in your head so that you give precise answers. What you want to do is study the questions and get a feel for the types of questions. And if there's something that's a little fuzzy in your head, talk to your fiancé about, well, when we went to go see this cultural play in my home country. What was the name of the hotel we stayed at? How much were the tickets? Those types of things. Very genuine, honest questions to make sure that you're fully prepared. Because at the end of the day, you want to win your case. You want to spend a life with the person you love here in the United States. So that's going to require a little work. So if you like this video, subscribe to my channel or hit the like button. If you have other questions about fiancé visas you'd like to ask me, just write them below or send me an email, carlos@bataraimmigrationlaw.com. That's carlos@bataraimmigrationlaw.com. If, in fact, you wanted to get started and you'd like to inquire about our services, our telephone number is 1-800-287-1180. But in any event, I really wish you the best. I hope that you and the love of your life have a great future together. And maybe someday I'll even meet you in the United States and you'll say, hey, Mr. Batara, I saw that video of yours and it really helped us in our interview. Hey, take care. Good luck. I wish you the best. Thanks for watching. Know someone who might be interested in this video? Then please take a moment to like and share it with them.
Also, if you would like more videos on immigration, just click on the subscribe button. And here's a little bonus, a short guide that you can download for free by clicking on the link on the description box or the square-shaped image. Plus, if you have ideas for videos you'd like to see, write a short comment below. Or feel free to contact me at carlos@VitaraImmigrationLaw.com or by calling 800-287-1180. My name is Carlos Vitara. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll be talking again very, very soon.